Hi, this is Andy Hoffman of CryptoGoldCentral.com, which publishes a daily cryptocurrency blog and provides professional crypto consultations to individuals and altcoin developers alike. This week's guest is to one-on-one as Alec Baldwin to Saturday Night Live, appearing regularly due to high demand and highly incremental content. That man, of course, is fellow World Crypto Network colleague and perma-Bitcoin optimist Adam Meister, who in my view is one of the global cryptocurrency community's most valuable assets. Not to mention the man who coined the term crypto dividend, an incredibly valuable aspect of Bitcoin that will be taken to levels not yet seen, even via Bcash, when B-Rhodium is launched later this summer, which, I might add, I'll be discussing in a special podcast directly after this one with Thomas Hunt, also right here on the World Crypto Network. To that end, Adam, welcome to an extremely opportunely timed one-on-one podcast, less than 24 hours from the big bam boom, few Hall & Oates fans, that ended all speculation, particularly by TA Fudsters, that it will ever see the $100 billion market cap level that has represented its lows since February. Breach to the downside. Welcome, Adam.
Hey, Andy. Great to be here.
Okay, just a little introduction here. I want to hear your views on everything. Today, I'm going to speak to the ultimate hodler, everybody, who empowered me when I was still learning about Bitcoin 3 years ago and still does today, not just with the fact-based analysis of why Bitcoin must succeed, but an optimism unparalleled in the entire space. On February 7th, mere hours after Bitcoin first bottomed, Adam and I taped the all-out Bitcoin Optimism Fest. And today, 24 hours after institutions exploded into Bitcoin yet again, we're here to tell you why Bitcoin is not only more undervalued than at any time in its history, but on the cusp of major game-changing events. This as the prices of the former wealth storage kings, precious metals, plunged to multi-year lows, whilst one after another fiat currencies experience dramatic declines. And oh yeah, global debt is rising parabolically, whilst inflation, cumulatively speaking, has never been higher. To that end, Adam, let's start with yesterday's monster upside move, which yet again confounded the brain-dead technical analysis that over and over again underestimates the power of Bitcoin demand. It did so last summer when a monthly 9-sell predicted a Bitcoin crash in November, at which point it instead rose from 5,000 to 20,000. This time around, when the Mt. Gox trustee dumped 6,000 Bitcoin on February 6th for decidedly non-fundamental reasons, Bitcoin's market cap fell to $100 billion for a few hours, prompting the same brain-dead technical analysis indicator to predict prices as low as $1,300. Nearly 6 months later, we have bounced off $100 billion 5 times, until finally yesterday we saw an explosion higher, not coincidentally on the heels of news that BlackRock, one of the world's largest financial players, will be entering the crypto space. Adam, give us your take on why Bitcoin has so ferociously defended the $100 billion market cap level, as well as what prompted the past 4 days' $1,200 price surge. Has Bitcoin bottomed? And if not, what could possibly cause it to make the brain-dead indicators predicting collapsing prices to be vindicated?
Well, I know this $100 billion market cap thing, you're on to something here. You're on to something here. It's, you know, at first when you were talking about it, I wasn't so sure, but as it got close and then it kept bouncing, I guess there are people out there or institutions out there, it appears, that like to think it's cheap when it gets down to, 5,800 to 5,900 and they pile back in and they're just using it as a number to take away the weak hands of Bitcoin. I'm not a technical analysis type of a guy. One reason I don't think a lot of people should think too much about technical analysis is because you just start to worry about every little change in the dollar value and you become obsessed with the price and your hand gets weak and you think you can make a change here and you're going to be able to profit off of $100 drop here and $100 rise here. And you end up having to pay a lot of taxes to the IRS because you keep buying and you keep selling. And again, for me, it's 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin. Yeah, sure. I noticed, everyone's noticed that the price in terms of fiat has gone up. And when the news first came out about BlackRock, I'm like, well, it's probably because a lot of people think that's awesome, that this huge conglomerate is going to buy a lot of Bitcoin eventually. But then right afterwards, the guy behind BlackRock started denying it. But yet the price in terms of fiat continued to go up. Now, the bottom line for me is eventually someone like BlackRock, they're going to buy a lot of Bitcoin, or they're going to buy a lot of cryptocurrency, period. It's not just going to be Bitcoin. That they will diversify, and that's their right if they want to do that. I don't advise doing something like that, but hey, that's them. And everyone's going to complain when they end up being trillionaires because they missed out and they were worried about they were worried about the difference between 6,100 and 6,400, and they never bought any Bitcoin. But BlackRock bought up all the Bitcoin they should have bought up, and they become haters of BlackRock and the 1%. And blame the 1% as much as you want to, people. Take personal responsibility and admit that, hey, they moved in when you were worried about it being between 6,200 and 6,250. When should I buy? If it's 6,225, the minutia of these numbers, it's ridiculous. Personally, I don't care what's driving the price up of Bitcoin. And yeah, it could drop. I've always said this. I'll keep on saying it. It could drop $500 right now. I don't care. There are going to be days it goes up $1,000. There are going to be days it goes down $1,000. In the long term, 2020 halving, it's going to be worth a lot more in fiat. I'm going to be able to get a Tesla with one of them eventually. It's just, you got to be patient. We've seen these ups and downs before. We're going to see them again. Just have a strong hand, and one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin.
Yeah. Well, obviously, people know that I am not a fan of TA, although, of course, I do use it myself. It's a tool in a toolbox. It's one of many things you look at. But as I experienced in the precious metal market for 15 years and in all kinds of markets, there's all these people out there that advertise themselves as knowing more than everyone else about something, proprietary trading or inside information or something or other, or web bot, or all these kind of things that are all BS. And 80%ers follow them. And they fall them to their doom. And I get particularly angry now because Bitcoin is the most important and undervalued asset of our lifetimes. And I do not like when I see people trying to scare them out of it, especially people who are always wrong. I mean, TA, it could be right in any way you interpret it, but it's mostly wrong and loses people money. And more importantly, gets Bitcoin out of people's hands. The $100 billion level, the funny thing is, there's nothing technical analysis about that to me. That's fundamental. That's fundamental. That's what we talked about back in the fall, the wall of institutional money. I mean, I wrote in September, before Brian Kelly even talked about it, how $100 billion is where the institutions come in. This is from my experience on Wall Street. And yes, that's where they came in. And that's why we had the big surge with the crypto hedge funds at the beginning of the year. And that's why they're in there now when it's at $100 billion. It's that simple. Yeah. Now, in my introduction, I spoke of major game-changing events on the horizon for Bitcoin, some of which we'll speak about now. The first is what we just talked about, BlackRock's announcement that it is forming a cryptocurrency team. And yeah, Adam, Larry Fink, he kind of denied it, but he didn't deny the fact that they have a cryptocurrency group being formed. I think he just wants to deflect some attention, but they definitely are doing that. But anyway, BlackRock, for people who don't know them, I tweeted the other day, much bigger than Goldman Sachs in terms of their impact on finance. They're the biggest ETF provider in the world. They're the biggest venture capitalist in the world. They may be the biggest real estate owner in all of America. These are a big deal when they're doing stuff. And as Adam said, they didn't get to be rich by being stupid. They know an undervalued asset when they see it. As well, we have the August 10th SEC decision on the CBOE sponsored Bitcoin ETF, which presumably addresses much of the SEC's prior concerns. Not to mention the fact that the Bitcoin network is much stronger than ever, has once and for all put to bed the notion that hard-forked competitors could damage it. And of course, there's major financial players like Fidelity developing custodial platforms. Goldman Sachs is buying Poloniex. I mean, these are big things going on in the mainstream world. So Adam, what's your view on the explosion of Bitcoin and crypto-related activity by mainstream financial firms? And how would you handicap the SEC's August 10th decision, which in my mind would be like a nuclear crypto explosion if they actually approve the ETF?
Well, I believe that nuclear explosion will happen eventually. Will it happen in August? I mean, we've been through this before with the SEC, and they do find reasons not to approve. I don't care if they do it in August or not, because I know eventually it's going to happen. It is going to happen. And I wouldn't, if it doesn't happen this time, sure, the people will panic. They will sell. They won't be thinking long term. It's eventually going to happen. The SEC will approve something just like this, and it will be huge, and all sorts of more institutional money will start to pour in at that point. So if I were to, I haven't thought about the odds yet, because I really live the one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin life.
Well, before
long-term life, I don't care if it happens or not, because I know it's going to happen eventually.
Before we get to the odds, because I would like to hear your odds. It's just a number. You know, we're talking about the explosion of mainstream financial investment between BlackRock, Fidelity, Goldman, and you name it. I mean, what's your take on all the mainstream rushing in right now, and does that increase the odds that the SEC approves it?
I think it's a silent rush, though, because again, it's like no one wants to be the one who totally admits it. I'm going gung-ho into this thing, because they don't want the price to jump up, so they can't. I think that's what BlackRock might be doing, is that they set a little bit too much, and that's going to boost the price, so they won't be able to get it as cheap. Will this help convince the SEC? You know, the SEC knows what's going on behind the scenes, that some of these big players have a huge interest in it. Will that spur them on a little bit more? Yeah, it increases the odds of them approving it in 2018, as opposed to, you know, what was going on in 2017 with the Winklevi and everything. And there wasn't as much interest. So I would have to say that the clear mainstream interest, when you get to the bottom of things, yeah, that could influence the SEC some to make it. It's more likely they'll approve it this year than last year when they didn't. But I still don't think they will. I don't think they will this time. I think there'll be another delay maybe or something. I'm not getting my hopes up about it, and I don't think anyone should be betting the farm on it. But what people should be hoping is that eventually they will do it. And eventually there'll be too much pressure coming from all sorts of institutions that want to get in on it, on the SEC, and they'll do it. And it'll just be, it'll be like a nuclear explosion at that point.
Well, there's so much going on this topic, because obviously, you know, the financial firms have a big say in Washington, and SEC is Washington. We know that Goldman Sachs has all but run Washington for many years, them and other financial players. So they obviously have the profit motive. At the same time, they don't want to be seen, like you say, it's not just about pushing the price up. They also don't want to be the poster child. They don't want Washington to look at them as, well, BlackRock is the firm in Bitcoin. They're the new villain. So he says, well, yeah, we're doing a little committee, but we're not going into Bitcoin. But of course they are. Goldman can't hide it, obviously, because the purchase of Poloniex through Circle. There's a lot of insider trading going on between all this information. And don't forget, we do have futures markets already, which are legitimized mainstream financial products. I mean, so you could say, well, the government doesn't want Bitcoin to do well, so they won't approve the ETF, but they approved the futures contracts, and the futures contracts brought a lot of institutional investment. So I, for one, think the odds are very high. Because the pressure on the government to do this is just getting higher. And, you know, the higher the price goes, the more Wall Street will pressure them. But then again, we will see what happens.
Yes, so I think a good summary for all the people out there that are listening right now, watching, is that there are clear signs of major institutional moves either being made or about to be made, and major government approval about to be made, you know, within a year or two. And all the signs are out there. So if you're watching this in 2022, there's no excuse why you didn't do it now, why you didn't get into Bitcoin now with all these signs. Because I think if you're watching this in the future, you'll be like, oh my God, it was so obvious what was about to happen. So here in the present, I think there are a lot of signs of big things about to happen. So are you going to end up being a hater, Or are you going to end up saying, hey, I want to beat these big people to the punch so I can be part of the elite instead of blaming the elite?
Right. And no bigger pink elephant in the room about this topic of why you should have known is this $100 billion market cap. That's where the price took off, and that's where the price is supported. That's where the institutions are. So if you look back in 2022 and you see that, yeah, we did bottom there, you'll go, why was I too dumb to realize that that's where the institutions were accumulating? So speaking of pink elephants, let's now talk about two of the biggest pink elephants in the history of financial pink elephants. In both cases, so violently Bitcoin bullish, it's difficult to believe anyone would not be buying at today's historically low Mayer multiple valuation, let alone as it could not be clearer that big institutions are supporting the price at, hey, I scripted this, $100 billion. The first being the utter collapse of precious metal prices, despite soaring debt and inflation readings. And the second, the upcoming 2020 halving, now just 22 months away. In my view, which I've very vocally discussed, silver, which I sold all of my position in last summer, is permanently dead as a monetary metal. And gold, which I sold my entire position in the spring, right behind it. In the emerging digital age, I see absolutely no value in precious metals other than maybe like a 9/11 type event. And once the millennials and Gen Z start inheriting it from the older generations that still cling to its dying use case, they will ferociously dump them in lieu of Bitcoin. Adam, what's your view on precious metals? And we'll get to the halving in a second. What's your view on precious metals as monetary instruments? Do they have a future as complements to Bitcoin and other cryptos? Or are they in the process of being fully usurped?
I think they're useless. I think sick doom porners out there who can't, get over it are just they just keep on pumping it up. The same old voices we've heard for 30 years who've been saying that the world's about to end are still talking about gold and silver, buy my newsletter. And hey, the 80%ers still fall for it though. The older ones do, at least. The younger 80%ers, they realize they can't carry it with them, and they can't. If you travel, I don't see how anyone who travels often can own any gold or silver. Really, I really don't see, because they're supposed to be like emergency assets that if you need to start a new life, you'll be able to take. But you can't take that anywhere. I mean, the TSA will strip you naked if you have any of that stuff on you. Okay, that. Digital gold is where it's at. This is the evolution of that old school gold into something completely different. I can't believe people still, Adam, do you own gold or silver? I've never owned gold or silver. No interest at all. So I can only imagine someone who's 19 years old, who's born in 1999, they're going to buy gold. I mean, no, it is such a doom porn thing. And the guys promoting it, so many of them believe in the most ridiculous of conspiracies that will have to come true in order for their silver to be worth anything. I really think it's a waste of people's time to think about it and to worry about it and to watch the people who are pumping it. Even though some of those people are starting to pump a little bit of Bitcoin, they're still into their silver this and their gold that. I mean, it's archaic. Tone was the one who said when they invented the metal detector, it got rid of the value of gold, and I think he was definitely onto something there. I mean, kids today, they're not going to get into gold or silver.
Right.
So
there's my rant. Yeah, go.
There's my rant on that, people.
Archaic is the perfect word to describe it. I disagreed with them at the time because of that, because no, gold didn't lose its use case with the metal detector. It lost its use case with Bitcoin. And it's just that simple. The reasons that I liked it back when there was no Bitcoin was it had things like, well, it's outside of the system and you can hold it privately and all that stuff. But then when you look at in a world of Bitcoin, it's almost laughable because it's actually not really outside the system at all. I mean, yes, you don't have to hold it in a bank. You can hold it at home, but that just makes it another risk that you have to deal with. And of course, you can't travel with it. And it's very illiquid and it'll never be fungible because there's all different kinds of it. But in the absence of Bitcoin, it was the best we had. And then it was destroyed, of course, by paper markets, which cannot happen in Bitcoin because Bitcoin blockchain is more transparent. And the one other thing I'll say is it's not just doom porners who say to buy gold and silver. I've said for years before Bitcoin that the reason to own it was because it was an inflation hedge. So you don't need the world to fall apart. The problem is, though, that that in the world of Bitcoin, there's no need for it. And of course, the paper markets have destroyed whatever it had left. I think that both are trading at 3-year lows right now. And I expect that 10, 20 years from now, when all that metal is inherited from the average person who owns precious metals is probably in their 60s or 70s by now, they're just going to sell it all. And there'll be no more bullion dealers, and there'll be no more interest in gold. You'll still have the Chinese government saying we're buying it, and everyone will say, well, so what? You should have bought Bitcoin with that money. Okay, regarding the second pink elephant, the next Bitcoin halving is scheduled for May 2020. This is something Adam has a lot more interested in talking about. Ahead of the initial expectation, which was July 2020, due to the exploding hash rate that is essentially zero chance of declining. When the July 2016 halving occurred, Bitcoin was a tiny $7 billion asset that had not even had its scaling debate resolved. They hadn't even started the scaling debate. Today, it is a $130 billion asset class, widely recognized in the mainstream, beyond its scaling debate, and on the verge of going viral. Thus, the 2020 halving will likely be a much bigger event than most imagine, and believe me, when it comes to the halving, Adam Meister can imagine a lot. So Adam, tell us your views of the event that you, more than anyone else, have discussed, the rapidly approaching 2020 Bitcoin halving. And do you believe the upcoming August 2019 Litecoin halving could prove to be a catalyst for investor front-running of the Bitcoin halving?
I think it will serve as an educational moment, the Litecoin halving. Because as much as I scream and shout about this 2020 halving, I've been screaming and shouting about it since the 2016 halving. So many people are like, what the heck is that thing? I'll buy Neo, I'll buy Ripple. They don't understand inflation versus deflation, limited supply, it's cooked into the books type of stuff. They don't care. But as I observed, as we got closer to 2016 halving, more and more media people picked up on it. And it started to become a story that was in the mainstream media, that the amount of new Bitcoin produced would be cut in half starting on this day. And it really started ramping. I think the halving was in June of 2016, and the story started coming out in about March or April of 2016. And the price started to rise because people started waking up to it like, oh, wait a second, I should get some now. So it will induce FOMO again, okay? It will. There's some people that are like, no, the price is already cooked into the books. No, it's not, because 80% of the people at least have no idea what it even is. And 80% of the people who own Bitcoin don't even know what it is. Even more of the people that are into cryptocurrency have no idea what the heck halving is, because they're buying Ripple and Neo and all this nonsense. But so this time around, though, the Litecoin halving last time was totally ignored. It was like Litecoin was $2 and then it stayed $2. It didn't make a big of a difference. It wasn't newsworthy. Now Litecoin is something that is sold on Coinbase. It's something that is talked about on CNBC. So I believe it's August of 2019, when their halving comes along, it will be covered this time, and it will wake people up to the fact that, hey, in a few more months, this Bitcoin halving is coming. So that could be the start of the ramp up to the Bitcoin price increase that is going to be associated with the Bitcoin halving. Just because people are going to be like, wait a second, X is happening to Litecoin, the same thing is going to happen to Bitcoin also, and they're going to get a grasp on what the halving is. If that doesn't happen, if that doesn't hype it up, then the Bcash halving is going to be in between the two. There's going to be the Bcash halving will be between the Litecoin halving and the Bitcoin halving. And believe you me, since they are very centralized, they're going to be hyping up their halving and trying to pump the Bcash price based on that a lot. And whether they like it or not, that's going to inform even more people about the Bitcoin halving, which will follow. So again, for the people who don't like Bcash, hey, there's a positive thing to even things that you don't like, because they are going to be hyping their halving, which will in turn hype the Bitcoin halving, which will in turn, create even more of a FOMO. And it'll help all of cryptocurrency. It'll even help all the Neos out there and Ripples probably.
That's hilarious, Adam, because you are right. In this particular case, Bcash will be a very, very big support for Bitcoin, especially because if they do try to pump it the way only they can do, it will really drive a lot of interest in the Bitcoin halving, since everyone knows that Bcash doesn't actually do anything, and Bitcoin is the most important financial asset in the world. And again, to say, when people say, oh, it's priced in, you're kidding, right? We're talking about, I can't even comprehend what kind of demand we'll have for Bitcoin 2 years from now at a time where they're going to be cutting in half. I mean, while you were talking, I just wrote down my list. We talked about BlackRock being or the ETF being a potential nuclear event for Bitcoin. And when I say nuclear, I'm talking about explosion of price. Believe me, August 10th, if the SEC approves that ETF, you're going to see a halving-like move in Bitcoin and the entire space. It's going to happen. And I wrote a bunch of the other things that I have here. Okay, BlackRock's announcement is sort of that way, especially when it's confirmed that one or more of the big Wall Street firms is acquiring. When Amazon says that they will be accepting Bitcoin, that will be another one. When any country, I don't care what country, I mean, I'm not talking about like the island nation of Samoa or something, but any country of any substance admits that they've been acquiring, whether it's Bulgaria or, God willing, like Japan, that's another one. The ETF, of course, and then there's the halving. And I can't overestimate what Adam's been talking about for so long. What's going to happen in 2020, 2 years from now, when they say that the supply is cut in half and the mainstream is well aware of what it is, especially as Adam said, well, we're talking about Litecoin having just a year from now, and then you'll also have the Bcash. I mean, we're talking about an exciting event, and it's less than 2 years away. Now, next, we're going to speak of a topic I have discussed at length in recent months, specifically the evolution of my views about altcoins from one of, quote, Bitcoin maximalism to acceptance that not only are altcoins here to stay, but that amidst the minefield of scams and pump and dumps, there will be some massive winners in the coming years. The reason being that while Bitcoin's dominance of the wealth storage use case is clearly insurmountable, there will unquestionably be dozens of niche use cases to profit on in the emerging digital age. Adam, please tell us your current view on altcoins' long-term outlook and how it has evolved since crypto exploded and crashed in the past year's time.
Well, I think there's going to be a clear top tier of altcoins that's going to survive and be successful. At the same time, there are going to be so many that will survive, but they won't be worth very much at all. And it'll just be for the gamblers out there. I mean, we're talking about BlackRock and huge institutions coming in. Their traditional model is diversification into undervalued assets. So they're going to be willing to take the chance on other altcoins too, which will indeed help a lot of these other ones. So right now, I think if you're some guy behind or a fan of one of these altcoins, you want to position yourself as best as possible to get into the position where a big institution will buy up a lot of yours and include it in their fund, or where a country will also buy up, because again, I think it is going to be huge when one of these countries finally admits that it's buying Bitcoin, but they're going to admit also that they were buying Ethereum too, possibly. So again, the way they are positioning themselves right now in altcoin is, to get on the Coinbase, to get on the Trezor, to get on the Ledger, just to get on, to make it easier for people to store and to buy them with fiat. I think is a way that these coins are positioning themselves right now, and just getting themselves, creating marketing teams. I mean, like it or hate them, Dash. They're doing all that. They're on Trezor. They're not on Coinbase yet, but they definitely have a marketing team. So, people say, well, what can they do that Bitcoin can't do? I don't know if that's going to be one of the most important factors in determining what a top tier altcoin is. I think the privacy ones like Monero, there's going to have to be a privacy one that's a top tier one. But again, Monero and Zcash are at the same time positioning themselves to either be on Coinbase or be on Trezor. It's Zcash is the one that's positioning itself to be on Coinbase. So yeah, there will definitely be a top tier. I don't know if they will have that many real use cases, but for the, as we have this institutional explosion, again, we're still in such the early days that they're going to have to be some altcoins that are going to get majorly pumped, and that a top tier is going to be formed just because of experimentation by tremendous institutions just wanting to say, hey, I diversified, or hedging just in case Bitcoin fails, or I want to be in something a little bit different than Bitcoin, so I'm going to get into this Ethereum thing.
Right. Well, a couple of things there. And first off and foremost is this diversify thing. I mean, this is exactly what happened in January of 2010. I said for the whole fall that as soon as you hit January 1st, if we're above 100 billion market cap, you're going to have dozens of crypto hedge funds, or hundreds. And hedge funds diversify. That's what they do. You can't be a hedge fund in crypto and just say, well, I'm going to buy Bitcoin. That's not a hedge fund. Otherwise, people have Bitcoin. So they diversify. And that's how Wall Street works in general, and certainly how hedge funds work. You diversify it. In crypto, there's really not that many choices. And that's why you had this historic pump in January, because most of the things were small and illiquid. But there's going to be a lot more capital coming in. There's going to be a lot more investment into the space that's going to create things that people want. And of course, there's going to be a lot higher valuations for everything, particularly those that can establish themselves as top tier simply due to inertia or due to having something that people want. And you talk about privacy. Privacy is a very generic thing. Like, for instance, we'll talk about Rhodium in a second. That's going to have privacy features. Will that be considered a privacy coin? I mean, I don't know. We'll get to that in a second, though. But you also mentioned, and you had mentioned for the past year, rightfully, when you get on Coinbase or when you get on Trezor, that establishes you as a top tier. But that's going to change also. Well, for one, look at Coinbase. They're a mess. Look at their announcements today. No one cares about them. There's like 200 exchanges in the world right now. There'll be many more. Some will be bigger than Coinbase. There'll be decentralized exchanges, all different ways of buying. So it'll marginalize specific exchanges. And then when it comes to security, yes, Trezor, Ledger have had a monopoly for a short time, but just like Bitmain did in mining, there'll be many other ways of buying and securely storing and splitting and all kinds of things crypto. In fact, I see that BGold just did their fix because they had the 51% attack, and you got all the people. Look, I'm no tech guy, but the maximalists will say, yeah, but look, every altcoin is going to have a 51% attack, and I'm going, no, they'll just develop technology to beat all that stuff. We're in the early phases. I'm not worried about. I don't own these things, but I'm not worried that you're going to need to be on Trezor or on Coinbase, because the world's going to change, and all this institutional money is going to come flying into everything. And if you happen to have something with a use case, well, you're going to make a lot of money, because there's going to be a huge amount of capital coming in. Now, finally, on the topic of altcoins and use cases, not to mention Adam's specialty crypto dividends, we have the rapidly approaching launch of Rhodium, which I'll be discussing directly after this podcast. It's at 8:15 Pacific time on a separate WCN call with Thomas Hunt, devoted entirely to Rhodium. In my view, Rhodium is the poster child of how to do an altcoin right. And thus, I truly believe that its launch, particularly if the crypto market is simultaneously in an upswing, could reignite interest in altcoin development in general. I'm going to save the specifics of my views for my call with Thomas. And of course, you can read the 24 or so articles I've written about it on my Steemit page, Andy Hoffman, and go to the Discord chat group where I'm there all the time. However, I'd like to hear Adam's views on Rhodium, as not only did he coin the term crypto dividend, but was the person who first told me about Rhodium, not to mention the Bitcore airdrop just before it, which taught me how to sign messages with my Trezor. Adam, what say you about Rhodium?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the Bitcore aspect of it, because that was an airdrop, and this is an airdrop too, and this is going to be a test to see how successful these airdrops can be in the modern 2018 era as opposed to 2017. And I think if they get it right, there could be a lot more airdrops to follow. What I would again stress to them, and again, they're pretty good. You know, you can contact them easily. That's a good aspect of them. You can send tweets to them. Just get on a good exchange. Get on the exchange. Take your time. Do not rush this thing. They're using the Bitcoin name, which just shows the strength of Bitcoin. It was an airdrop based on Bitcoin, again, showing the strength of Bitcoin. They got that to and they're going for this exclusivity type of thing, the limited amounts of it. There's not too much of it. And I brought up that unobtainium with an altcoin that exists, that's scarce, that has a scarcity play also, that continues to go up in value. So, you know, in the land of altcoin fans, it's clear that there are people that value scarcity aspects. So if these guys can get on, I mean, the key is to get on some exchanges and then, you know, start hyping it up at that point. But the first step at this point where they are right now is to get on some exchanges so that people are going to be able to sell it, so that people are going to be able to buy it. People have asked me, where can I buy it at? I'm like, where can you buy it at? I mean, you should have been like, you could have got it for free, dude. But again, that's the way this works. There's so many, it just shows you there are so many people who have the opportunity to get things for free, but they just end up having to buy it. I think, again, and again, just take your time, B-Rodian people, keep on marketing and get on those exchanges. And I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens, because they're gonna be able to say, we're the scarcity ones out there now with the Bitcoin name, better than anything called unobtainium or whatever you want to call it. And we airdropped it, and it was for Bitcoin people. And then you could be an airdropper too, but we're the first huge success. So we'll see how it goes.
Right. And a couple of comments. I'm just writing notes from what you said. First of all, when you say, will the airdrop be successful? The airdrop was successful. It's done. The people who claimed it have it in their online encoded Bitcoin Rhodium wallets. They have it. They're not waiting.
Yeah, but it's not considered a success unless, you know, it's going to be, is this thing going to be worth anything?
Right. I'm just saying that the part about the actual airdrop is done. And there were some issues. In fact, I'll just bring them up now, because we all learned things during this airdrop process, including the developers of B-Rhodium, just as we learned things during the Bitcoin airdrop. And I say this because I believe, I've written this many times, that the airdrop is the crypto dividend of the future, the altcoin development choice of the future. And that's why Bitcoin will be even more valuable than ever. For one, people have to realize that when you are doing a claiming of an airdrop, you have to claim, there'll be a snapshot date, meaning, you know, when did you have Bitcoin as of? You have to use addresses that hold Bitcoin. You can't just say, well, here's my Trezor, let me just put some address, let me create an address and put it there and it'll know that my Trezor is other one. No, you have to use the actual public addresses that actually have Bitcoin on them. There's also another thing that you need to be aware of, which we all learned. I didn't realize it during Bitcore or even into the latter stages of B-Rhodium. There's a thing called a change address, which is a fail-safe mechanism that Trezor and Ledger use. When you move any Bitcoin off of your Trezor, it will automatically move your Bitcoin to different public addresses within your Trezor, which you can't even see. So oftentimes people would claim like the B-Rhodium using addresses that they thought had Bitcoin, but they don't. And you can look, by the way, on Block Explorer to see if there's any Bitcoin. And if you don't see it, you might have to have an expert like my friend Rocky Palumbo help you find the Bitcoin change addresses. But the point is, there's all kinds of issues that people learn. It's a trial and error process, but all in all, it was a very successful process of getting it done. And yes, when you talk about exchanges, you could not be more right. I mean, we've already talked about this with Be Private. Be Private had many other issues, but that was obviously one of them. They rushed to get it out without having an exchange, and they still don't have an exchange, and now it's worthless. In this case, I don't think that'll be an issue at all. One, because I think the exchanges are, after what they just went through, are dying to have quality cryptocurrencies on them after all the crap that they've been forced to list and in some cases delist. And also back then, when everyone was rushing to get on the exchanges, there was competition. Like if you went to Poloniex or Bittrex, it'd be like 10,000 coins trying to get on. Now it's like crickets. There's no other real coins in development. They're all waiting for the bull market to return. So I don't think they'll have any problem. And I also think that, believe me, the developers of B-Rhodium are well aware of what you have been recommending for some time to take your time, as they certainly have, as they approach the launch. And one of the things they're taking their time with is making sure they get the exchanges. I will comment about unobtainium, though. I thought that was interesting that you brought that up. I had heard of it. I didn't really look into it until you mentioned it on your podcast the other day, on your daily podcast. And yes, it's been around for some time. It was created via mining, so it was fair, not an airdrop, but mining. It's merged mined with Bitcoin, which I read into, but I don't quite understand exactly how that relates to Bitcoin. But it has worked well. It's been around several years. It trades for $100 and something dollars. But it's not marketed at all, and it's on one New Zealand exchange, and no one really knows about it. So it probably, if it's secure, it probably will do well too. But it's not going to get the marketing of B-Rhodium, and we'll see. It's something I'm going to watch. So anyway, with that, and again, my call with Thomas is in a half an hour on the WCN. We'll conclude today's extremely hard-hitting educational podcast featuring one of the sector's most inspirational and passionate Bitcoin supporters, Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister. Go to his Bitcoin Meister YouTube channel for his daily and weekly programming. It's also on the WCN's iTunes feed. And of course, his Twitter handle is @TechBalt, as in Technology Baltimore. As for me, please check out my daily blog at CryptoGoldCentral.com. Follow me on Twitter at Andy_Hoffman_CG. Unless, of course, you're a King TA Fudster follower, you probably won't like me. And contact me about crypto consultations at ahoffman@CryptoGoldCentral.com. I'll see you all in about a half an hour. And Adam, thank you so much for being here again.
Pound that like button, people.
Pound that like button. Take like button. Take it easy. Have a great crypto day.